This is my pathetic sister. No real job, no future, just an unskilled laborer.
My brother's voice sliced through the ballroom, sharp and careless, like a blade through soft fabric. Around 200 people in tailored suits turned in unison. Champagne glasses froze midair. Someone actually gasped. I stood there in my nicest jeans and the silk blouse I had bought specifically for this night, feeling heat rush to my face as scattered laughter rolled through the room. Julian Mercer lifted his glass with a smug smile. My own brother at his merger celebration in front of everyone who mattered to him. And the worst part was Eleanor Mercer. My mother smiled. Not broadly. Just that tight, controlled expression she always wore when Julian reminded me of my place. As if she agreed but was too polite to say it out loud. Let me rewind for a moment. My name is Maya Mercer. I am 34 years old. And according to my family, I am the failure who digs ditches for a living. What they do not know is this. I own Mercer Design Group, a landscape architecture firm with 47 employees working across 3 states. Last year we brought in $11 million in revenue. This year, we secured a $4,200,000 contract with the city for the Bayside Waterfront Revitalization Project. My company has been featured twice in Design Monthly. We won a National Design Award for the Oak Ridge Commons restoration. But sure, I am just the pathetic sister who plays in the dirt. I never told my family any of this. Not about the money. Not about the awards. Not about the fact that our weekly payroll alone comes out to $47,000. I suppose I had a naive hope that one day they would see me for who I am without attaching a price tag first. That maybe, just maybe, they would love their daughter and sister without needing to know my net worth. That did not happen. Julian is 38. 4 years older than me and somehow 400 years more arrogant. He works in finance, which in our family basically makes him untouchable. Eleanor has called him her little success story ever since he landed his first internship at 22. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every random Tuesday phone call. Somehow it always circles back to Julian's latest promotion, Julian's new car, Julian's important clients. Me. Oh, Maya is still doing her little gardening thing. It is not gardening. I have explained that roughly 7,000 times. I am a licensed landscape architect. I design outdoor environments, manage large construction projects, and run a company with a fleet of equipment worth more than Julian's house. That's nice, honey, my mother always says. But when are you going to get a real job? Something indoors where you don't get all dirty. I stopped trying to explain years ago. Some battles are not worth fighting. Or at least that is what I believed. Then Julian called me 3 weeks before his merger party. He said he wanted me there. That alone should have warned me. Julian never wants me anywhere. I am the relative he pretends does not exist at his networking events. His words were very clear. Listen, Maya. This is a big night for me. Serious people will be there. So maybe do not talk too much about your dirt business, okay? I do not need you embarrassing me. I should have said no. I should have told him exactly where to put his invitation. But this is my weakness. I love my brother. Somewhere beneath all that arrogance is the kid who built blanket forts with me. The teenager who taught me how to drive. The person I once believed would always stand up for me. So I said yes. Apparently I enjoy punishment. I spent 3 days choosing an outfit. Not too elegant because Julian would mock me for trying too hard. Not too casual because then I would be the slob who could not dress properly. I settled on dark jeans, a cream silk blouse, and the only pair of heels I own that do not make me want to cry after 20 minutes. When I walked into the ballroom I actually felt hopeful. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe Julian would introduce me properly. Maybe I could talk to normal people who did not assume I was worthless the moment they saw me. Then I noticed the venue. It was the Sovereign Plaza. Specifically, the newly renovated The Sovereign Plaza, complete with its award-winning outdoor terrace, sustainable garden systems and custom water installation. I almost laughed. My company had designed and built all of it. We finished the project 14 months earlier. There was a bronze plaque beside the fountain with Mercer Design Group engraved on it. Right there in the lobby. My brother had walked past it without ever noticing. I grabbed a glass of champagne and searched for a quiet corner. That was when I saw Eleanor making her dramatic entrance, heading straight for Julian like gravity pulled her in. She hugged him for a full 30 seconds. When she finally noticed me, I received a brief wave and a look that clearly said, "Do not cause trouble tonight." I'm doing great. My business is thriving. I just hired 3 new project managers. But yes, let us talk more about Julian's suit. I was mentally planning my escape when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around and found Caleb Vance standing there. My ex-boyfriend. The man who ended things 8 years ago because I was, in his words, going nowhere with that lawn business of yours. The man who told me I had no ambition and would never amount to anything. He had clearly had a hair transplant since the last time I saw him. It looked like someone had glued a small, frightened animal to his forehead. But sure, I was the one who had let myself go. "Hiya," he said warmly, as if we were old friends instead of 2 people who had not spoken in almost a decade. "Wow. You look the same." "Thank you, Caleb. You look different. Very different. Especially your hairline." He missed the sarcasm completely. He always did. It turned out Caleb was a potential investor for Julian. Of course he was. Because the night was not chaotic enough already. Before I could excuse myself and disappear anywhere else, Julian tapped his glass and called for attention. He wrapped one arm around me, his smile wide and artificial. "Everyone, I would like you to meet my family. This is my beautiful wife, Sienna. My wonderful mother, Eleanor. And this," he said, gesturing at me, "is my pathetic sister. No real job. No future. Just a unskilled labor." The room burst into laughter. My mother smiled. Caleb snorted champagne through his nose, which was the single satisfying moment of the entire evening. I stood there, frozen, wondering how I had spent 34 years loving people who could not even pretend to respect me. But when you spend your life being underestimated, you learn certain skills. You learn how to observe. You learn how to wait. And you start noticing things other people overlook. Like how Julian kept checking his phone, panic flickering beneath his confidence. Like how his smile never fully reached his eyes. Like how he drained 3 glasses of champagne in 20 minutes. Something was wrong. One older man standing near the wall noticed it too. He was not laughing. He was watching Julian with the focused stillness of a hawk tracking prey. Our eyes met across the room. He lifted his glass slightly in my direction. I did not know who he was yet. But I was about to find out. Before we continue, if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is there. I see everything. Thank you so much for your support. Now where was I? Right. Standing in the center of my personal nightmare. While 200 strangers laughed and moved on, the party continued as if nothing had happened. And for them it had not. Julian's joke faded into the background, just another moment of entertainment. But I could still feel it sitting heavy in my chest. That familiar weight of being the family disappointment. That was when Sienna appeared beside me, perfectly dressed, sensing weakness like a predator. My sister-in-law had mastered the art of the compliment that cuts. "Oh Maya," she said sweetly, scanning me from head to toe. "Couldn't find anything nicer to wear? I mean, it works for you. Very practical." She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first truck. Her blonde hair was arranged in one of those elaborate updos that clearly required 3 hours and a professional stylist. She looked like she had stepped out of a magazine. The kind of magazine that might be called Gold Diggers Monthly. "Thanks, Sienna. I love your dress. Very tight." She could not quite tell whether I was being sincere. Sienna never managed to figure me out, which I considered one of my personal victories. The next hour turned into a masterclass in social endurance. Caleb kept appearing wherever I moved, offering patronizing remarks about how I should really think about changing careers before it was too late. My mother cornered me twice to remind me that Julian was nervous and that I should be supportive instead of hiding in corners. And Julian himself strutted through the room like a peacock who had just discovered the secret to eternal confidence. I kept watching. I kept noticing. His investor pitch was polished but empty. Plenty of talk about growth and opportunity. Very few actual numbers. The executives from the company he was merging with looked composed and assured. but they kept exchanging looks whenever Julian spoke. The kind of looks that silently ask, "Are you hearing this too? I know business. You do not build a $12 million company without learning how to read a room." And this room was reading Julian as someone trying far too hard to sell. That was when I noticed my father. He was seated near a window looking smaller than I remembered. When had he gotten so thin? He was 72, but he had always seemed strong, solid, permanent in that way fathers are supposed to be. Now he looked tired, distracted. His suit hung on him as if it belonged to someone else. My mother stood over him, speaking in that sharp whisper she uses when she is irritated. Dad nodded along, not really engaging. I started toward them, but Julian intercepted me. "Not now," he hissed. "Dad is fine. Do not make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I just want to say hello to our father." "I need you mingling," he said. "Caleb thinks you might be a good contact for some of his lower-tier clients. Small landscaping jobs. That kind of thing. It would be good for you to have something on your resume." I stared at him. "I own a company, Julian. I have a resume. It is full of accomplishments." He waved his hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. Real experience. Come on. Do not be difficult." I let him guide me away because I was too stunned to argue. Small landscaping jobs. Lower-tier clients. My company had recently completed work for the state executive residence. But sure. Let us start small. Caleb was waiting, smiling with that newly transplanted hairline. He launched into a long explanation of his investment philosophy while I quietly calculated how many of his portfolios I could probably buy outright. The answer was most of them. "You know, Maya," he said, leaning closer as if sharing a secret, "I always knew you had potential. You just needed direction. If you had stayed with me, I could have helped you become something." "I became something without you," I said calmly. "That is the point." He laughed as if I had made a joke. "That was always your problem. You never understood what you could achieve with the right guidance." I was about to respond when Sienna's voice rose above the noise of the room. She was speaking to a small group of women near the bar and was making no effort to lower her volume. "Oh, Maya," she said brightly. "She's sweet. Really. Just a little simple. She digs holes for a living. I keep telling Julian he should help her find a real career, but you know how family is. You cannot choose them." The women laughed. Polite laughter. Social laughter. My mother was standing with them. She did not laugh. But she did not defend me either. She sipped her wine and stared up at the ceiling as if it were the most fascinating architectural detail she had ever seen. Something inside me cracked. Not shattered. I had learned resilience long ago. But cracked like ice right before it gives way. I needed air. I slipped out onto the terrace. My terrace. The one my company had designed. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from the raised beds we had planted. Everything out there was my work. My vision. My success. And no one inside had any idea. That was when the older man from earlier stepped onto the terrace. He was tall, probably in his late 60s, with silver hair and that relaxed elegance that suggests wealth without effort. His watch likely cost more than my first 3 years in business combined. "Beautiful work out here," he said, gesturing toward the garden. "The water feature especially. Very refined design." "Thank you," I replied. He smiled. "You designed this, did you not?" I recognized the style from Oak Ridge Commons. I blinked. "How do you know about Oak Ridge Commons?" "Because I read," he said simply. "And because your project won a National Design Award last year. There was an excellent piece in Design Monthly. Maya Mercer, founder of Mercer Design Group." He held out his hand. "Preston Whitman." I shook it, still processing. "Should I know you?" "Probably not. I'm retired now. Spent 40 years in investment banking." He glanced back through the glass doors toward Julian, who was still working the room with his practiced smile. "I know your brother's type. And I know his company." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Preston lowered his voice. "Your brother is in trouble. His firm is under federal investigation. Securities fraud. The merger he is celebrating tonight is not a promotion. It is an exit. I felt the ground shift beneath me. That is not possible. Julian is the success story. His expression remained calm but serious. The investigation has been ongoing for 8 months. I still have contacts in the industry. The firm he is joining is effectively buying his silence. They just do not know everything yet. He paused. And I suspect they do not know what you know either. What I know. He nodded toward my father, still sitting alone by the window. Your father looks confused. Has Julian been managing his finances? The crack inside me widened. How did you know that? I did not, he said honestly. But I have seen this pattern before. When people become desperate, they take from those who trust them most. I stared at my father through the glass. Dad had mentioned money being tight lately. I had assumed it was the economy. Poor investments. Nothing more. What if it was much worse? Preston handed me his card. You should look into this quietly. And if you find what I believe you will find, you should be prepared. Your brother's structure is about to collapse. The only question, he added, is who gets buried when it does. He left me standing there, surrounded by my own work, with the terrifying realization that everything I believed about my family might be wrong. Julian was not the success story. He was the fraud. And my father might be his victim. I did not sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Preston Whitman's card on my nightstand like a ticking bomb. Federal investigation. Securities fraud. The words echoed in my mind. Part of me wanted to dismiss it. Julian was arrogant. Dismissive. Cruel enough to humiliate me in front of 200 people. But a criminal? That felt extreme. Then I remembered my father's face. The confusion. The loose suit. The way my mother spoke to him as if he could not be trusted to behave. I have always trusted my instincts. You do not survive in construction without them. You sense when a contractor lies about materials. You feel when a client hides budget problems. Your body recognizes danger before your mind does. And my body was screaming that something was very wrong. At 6 a.m, I gave up on sleep and did what I always do when I need clarity. I drove to a job site. We were in the middle of installing a Japanese garden for a tech executive out in the suburbs, and watching my crew work always settles my mind. I sat in my truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles on it and a dent in the tailgate from the day my foreman accidentally backed into a boulder. I love that truck. It is paid off. It runs perfectly. And it does not care how much money I make, unlike certain family members I could name. As the sun climbed over the construction site, I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. First, I called Preston Whitman. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he had been expecting my call. I asked him to tell me everything he knew about the investigation into Julian's company. We talked for 45 minutes. Preston was careful, sharing only what was technically public information or widely known in financial circles, but it was enough. Julian's firm had been cooking the books for years. Inflating returns. Hiding losses. Shuffling money around to plug holes. The SEC had been building a case for nearly a year. Julian was not just facing a job loss. He could be facing criminal charges. But Preston admitted he did not know everything. The family side, the personal finances, that is beyond my scope, he said. But I know the pattern, Maya. When these guys start feeling pressure, they look for lifeboats. And those lifeboats usually belong to people who trust them. People like our father. I thanked Preston and ended the call. Then I sat in my truck for another 20 minutes, watching my crew place boulders with slow precision, thinking through my next move. Here is something my family never understood about me. I did not build a $12 million company by accident. I built it by being methodical, patient, thorough to the point of obsession. When I take on a project, I plan every detail. When I face a problem, I collect information before I act. When I make a decision, I make sure I have evidence to support it. Julian had spent his entire life underestimating me. He thought I was the dumb sister who got lucky with a small business. He had no idea what was coming. Step 1 was reconnaissance. That afternoon, I called my father and kept my tone casual. Hey Dad. Just checking in. How are things? It started normally. He talked about his garden. He had always loved puttering around in the yard, which is probably where my own love of growing things came from. But when I asked about his visit to the financial advisor last month, his voice shifted. "Oh, Julian's handling all that now," he said. "He told me it would be easier if he managed everything together. Something about better returns." I kept my voice light even as alarms went off in my head. "That is nice of him. So Julian has access to your accounts." "He has power of attorney," Dad said as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Your mother insisted. She said I was getting too old to handle the complicated stuff." Power of attorney. My 38-year-old brother had power of attorney over our 72-year-old father's finances, and no one had bothered to tell me. I ended the call with a cheerful goodbye. Then I immediately called my attorney. Monica Chin had been my business lawyer for 8 years. She handled everything from contract disputes to employee issues, and she is the smartest person I know when it comes to protecting assets. I told her what I suspected. She went quiet for a long moment. "Maya, if what you are telling me is true, this could be elder financial abuse," she said finally. "That is a serious crime. I know you need to be careful. If you are wrong, you could permanently damage your family relationships. If you are right." She paused. "If you are right, your brother could go to prison." "I know," I said. "I know that too." Monica recommended a private investigator she had worked with before, a man named Victor Black who specialized in financial fraud. I called him within the hour. Victor was blunt, direct, and completely unimpressed by family drama. "Just tell me what you need and I will find it," he said. "Save the soap opera for the holidays." "I think my brother has been stealing from my father," I said. "I need proof." Victor told me he would have preliminary information within 2 weeks. He warned me that I might not like what he found. "I'm prepared for that," I told him. I was not. Not really. While Victor dug into financial records, I started digging too. I called the city assessor's office and learned there was a new lien on my father's house. It had been filed 6 months earlier. Dad had lived in that house for 35 years. He had owned it free and clear since I was in high school. Now there was a $200,000 debt attached to it. My hands shook when I hung up. I also looked into the firm Julian was supposedly merging with. They were legitimate, successful, respected. But they were known for being extremely cautious about partnerships. They did exhaustive due diligence, background checks, financial audits, every layer of verification, which meant either they had not finished their research on Julian yet, or someone had fed them incomplete information. Preston had mentioned he still had contacts in the industry. I found myself wondering how much influence a retired investment banker could still carry. 3 days after the party, I drove to visit my parents. Not to confront anyone. I was not ready for that. I needed more evidence first. I just needed to see my father and assess the situation with my own eyes. What I found made my blood run cold. Dad was worse than he had looked at the party. He seemed confused about basic things. What day it was. Whether he had eaten lunch. My mother kept answering for him, talking over him as if he were not there. I managed to get Dad alone for a few minutes while my mother was in the kitchen. I asked him directly about his finances. His eyes went cloudy. "I do not know, honey," he said. "Julian says everything is fine. He is taking care of it." "Do you know how much is in your retirement account, Dad?" He could not answer. He did not know. He did not even know which bank his accounts were with anymore. "Julian takes care of everything," he repeated like a mantra. "Julian knows what he is doing." I left my parents' house with tears in my eyes and fury burning in my chest. My brother had taken advantage of our father's trust. His aging mind. His belief that family would never hurt him. Julian had built his career on looking brilliant while other people did the real work. Now he was building an escape fund on our father's life savings. 2 weeks later, Victor Black called with his report. The damage was worse than I had imagined. Over the past 2 years, Julian had transferred $340,000 from Dad's accounts into his own. He had taken out the loan against the house without Dad fully understanding what he was signing. He had even cashed out a life insurance policy that was supposed to go to my mother if anything happened to Dad. Total theft, $500,000. My father had worked 40 years as an electrician. He saved carefully, lived modestly, built a nest egg meant to carry him and my mother through their final years. And Julian had stolen almost all of it. I sat in my office with Victor's report in my hands, staring out at the company I had built from nothing. 47 employees depended on me. Millions in contracts. A reputation earned through sweat, discipline, and thousands of hours of hard work. Julian had never worked like that for a single day in his life. He had only taken and taken and taken. But his taking was about to end. I called Monica. Then I called Preston. Then I called a contact I had made 3 years earlier when my company did landscaping for the federal building downtown. A man named Marcus Hayes, who worked in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Julian thought he was the smart one in our family. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next 3 weeks were the most focused of my life. And considering I once managed 17 construction projects at the same time during a supply chain crisis, that is saying something. I set up what I called my war room in my home office. Victor Black's financial report. Bank statements. Property records. A timeline of every suspicious transaction Julian had made. I covered an entire wall with documents and sticky notes, turning it into something that looked like a revenge-themed inspiration board. My cat Machi was deeply concerned about my mental state. She kept sitting directly on the most important papers and meowing at me, as if she were trying to stage an intervention. But Machi does not understand complex financial fraud, so I chose to ignore her professional opinion. Marcus Hayes at the FBI turned out to be more helpful than my cat, though significantly less affectionate. When I called him and explained what I had uncovered, there was a long pause on the line. "Ms. Mercer," he finally said, "you realize that what you are describing is a separate crime from what we are already investigating. Securities fraud is one matter. Stealing from a 72-year-old man with declining cognitive function is elder financial abuse." He asked me to send everything I had. Victor Black's report. Bank records. Property liens. All of it. He promised to review the material personally and call me back within a week. True to his word, he called 6 days later. "We are very interested in pursuing this," he said. "The elder abuse charges would be handled at the state level, but because of the overlap with our federal case, we can coordinate." Then he added, "We need to proceed carefully. Your brother is already a person of interest. If he panics and runs, we lose everything." I asked what he needed from me. Marcus explained that the FBI had been building a case against Julian's firm for months. They had evidence of securities fraud, falsified reports, and misappropriated client funds. Julian was not the mastermind. That role belonged to his boss. But Julian had been involved enough to face serious charges. The challenge was timing. They wanted to move on everyone at once before anyone could destroy evidence or disappear. My proof about the money stolen from my father added another layer. It strengthened the case, but it also made the operation more delicate. "We need a controlled environment," Marcus said. "Somewhere we know he will be. Somewhere we can coordinate with local authorities." That was when I remembered Julian's announcement at the party. He had been planning a family dinner at an upscale restaurant the following month, a celebration of his merger with his new business partners present. "What if I told you exactly where he will be?" I said, "on a specific night, surrounded by the people he is desperate to impress?" There was a brief silence. "Tell me more," Marcus said. Over the next 3 weeks, I became the most supportive sister on the planet. I called Julian to congratulate him on the merger. I sent Sienna flowers with a note saying how happy I was for them. I even called my mother and suggested we all get together to celebrate Julian's success properly. She was suspicious at first. "Since when do you care about Julian's career?" "I have been thinking about what you said," I replied, nearly choking on the words. "About being more supportive. About appreciating what Julian has accomplished. I want to try harder." She practically melted through the phone. "Oh Maya, that is so mature of you. Julian will be thrilled." He was. So pleased, in fact, that he called me himself, which had not happened in roughly 3 years. "This is great," Julian said enthusiastically. "Really great. I am glad you are finally coming around. This dinner is important." My new partners will be there. I need the family to make a good impression. I will be on my best behavior, I promised. What I did not mention was that Preston Whitman would also be attending. I had called him the day after finalizing the plan with Marcus, and he had been more than willing to help. I have been waiting 40 years to watch someone like your brother get what is coming to him, Preston said. Consider me your +1. He also made a few carefully placed phone calls to his contacts at the firm Julian was joining. He did not tell them everything. Just enough to make them uneasy. Just enough to prompt questions. Just enough to ensure that when the truth surfaced they would be ready to run. The restaurant Julian chose was the Gilded Leaf. White tablecloths. Overpriced steaks. The kind of place where ordering chicken earns silent judgment. I had actually done some landscaping consultation for them 2 years earlier. Their patio garden was my design, completed pro bono in exchange for a lifetime discount on their wine list. Life is about making strategic investments. I coordinated timing with Marcus. FBI agents in plain clothes would be positioned inside the restaurant. There would be no scene. This was not a movie. They would wait for my signal, then approach Julian discreetly and ask him to step outside. Controlled. Professional. Devastating. Before that, I had one final piece of preparation. I spent an entire weekend with my accountant reviewing my finances. Mercer Design Group was valued at $12 million. My personal savings, investments, and property totaled another $3 million. By any reasonable standard, I was wealthy. I had never felt wealthy. I still drove my old truck. I still wore work boots most days. I still came home with dirt under my fingernails. Money had never been the point. Building something was. Creating something meaningful from raw materials and hard work. But money was about to matter because I was going to use mine to fix what Julian had broken. I set up a trust for my father's care. I arranged to pay off the fraudulent lien on his house. I contacted an elder law attorney to establish proper guardianship so no one could exploit him again. When this was over, my father would be protected. My mother would be taken care of. And Julian would face the consequences of his choices. The night before the dinner, my phone rang. It was Julian. His voice sounded different. Tight. Almost desperate. I need to ask you something, he said. And I need you not to ask questions. What is it? I need to borrow some money. Just $50,000. I will pay you back within a month. I swear. I kept my voice neutral. $50,000 is a lot, Julian. I know. But I am in a tight spot. Some investments did not work out the way I expected. It is temporary. The merger will fix everything. I just need to get through the next few weeks. He was scared. I could hear it. The golden child was finally realizing that his house of cards was starting to sway. I pretended to hesitate. That is a lot of money, I said. I am not sure I have that kind of cash sitting around. Come on, Maya, he pressed. I know you have done okay with your little business. You must have something saved. Your little business. Even now, begging me for money, he could not stop belittling me. Let me think about it, I said. We can talk more at dinner tomorrow. He thanked me repeatedly. That alone was unprecedented. Julian had never thanked me for anything in his life. After the call, I sat alone in the dark living room, Machi purring on my lap. Tomorrow everything would change. Julian thought he was getting a supportive family dinner and a $50,000 loan from his pathetic sister. What he was actually getting was the end of everything he had built on lies. I scratched Machi behind the ears. You know what? I said quietly. Revenge really is best served at a restaurant with a lifetime wine discount. She did not answer. She is more of a listener than a conversationalist. The Gilded Leaf looked beautiful that evening. Soft lighting. Fresh flowers on every table. The gentle hum of expensive conversation filling the room. I wore my best dress. A simple navy blue one I had bought for an industry awards ceremony 2 years earlier. Heels that did not make me want to cry. Real jewelry. Julian barely noticed. Maya, there you are, he said when I arrived, already scanning the room for someone more important. You look fine. Listen, have you thought about what we discussed? We can talk later, I said. After dinner. Let's not make this about money. He forced a smile, frustration vibrating beneath it. Right. Right. Family first. The private dining room was already filling up. Julian's new partners from the merger firm were there. Two polished executives, Grant and Lydia, who looked as if they had been manufactured in a laboratory designed to produce maximum corporate blandness. Sienna, glittering in a dress that probably cost more than my first year of business revenue. My mother, regal in her disapproval. My father sat quietly, confused but pleased to be included. And Caleb, because of course Caleb was there. Still trailing Julian, still wearing that unfortunate hair transplant, still convinced he was the smartest person in any room. He made a direct line for me. Maya, wow, he said. You clean up nicely. I almost did not recognize you without the dirt. Thanks, Caleb, I replied. I almost did not recognize you with the hair. He touched his head self-consciously. It's a new treatment. Very advanced. It certainly exists, I said. If you are enjoying this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support truly means everything and it helps these stories reach more people. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Now back to the moment I had been waiting for. Preston Whitman arrived right on time, composed and distinguished in a charcoal suit. He shook hands with Grant and Lydia, who clearly recognized his name the moment they heard it. Their expressions changed instantly. Preston Whitman? Grant asked. I had no idea you would be here. Preston smiled pleasantly. I am an old friend of the Mercer family. Maya invited me. Julian's face shifted through several colors in quick succession. He had not known I knew Preston. He certainly had not expected me to invite industry royalty to his dinner. That's wonderful, Julian said tightly. The more the merrier. We took our seats. Wine was poured. Appetizers were served. Julian stood to make his toast. Thank you all for being here tonight, he began, that familiar confident smile locked in place. This merger represents everything I have worked toward. A new chapter. Proof that hard work and smart decisions always pay off. He gestured around the table. I am surrounded by the people who matter most. My beautiful wife. My wonderful mother. My new partners who I know will lead us to incredible success. Then his eyes landed on me. And even my sister, he said, who is finally learning what real success looks like. Some of us work with our hands. Some of us work with our minds. I have always believed the mind is the more valuable tool. Polite laughter circled the table. My mother beamed. My father looked confused. Sienna smirked. Caleb actually winked at me as if we were sharing a private joke at my expense. I smiled calmly and took a sip of wine. Julian continued congratulating himself for several more minutes. His voice was steady but his hands trembled slightly. Grant and Lydia kept exchanging glances. Preston observed everything with the patience of someone who had seen this performance before. Finally, Julian raised his glass. To the future. To the future, everyone echoed. That was when Preston cleared his throat. Before we drink to that, he said, standing slowly, there is something your new partners should see. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table toward Grant and Lydia. Julian went pale. What is this? He demanded. What are you doing? Preston's voice remained calm. It is the result of a preliminary audit. One your new partners quietly requested an audit 3 weeks ago after I suggested they might want to review the numbers more closely. Grant opened the folder. His expression shifted from curiosity to alarm in seconds. Julian, he said slowly, these figures do not match what you presented to us. These are old numbers, Julian snapped. The current situation is completely different. Lydia leaned in to read. This shows systematic falsification going back 3 years. There are SEC violations throughout. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Julian. Then his phone rang. He grabbed it instantly. Hello. His face drained of color. What do you mean they're at my house? What warrant? He looked up wild-eyed. That was when he noticed the two people who had quietly entered the dining room. A man and a woman, calm, professional, dressed in suits that unmistakably signaled federal authority. Julian Mercer, the man said, I am Agent Marcus Hayes with the FBI. We have questions for you regarding financial fraud and the misappropriation of funds. We need you to come with us. Julian's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. This is insane, he protested. I haven't done anything wrong. The female agent produced a document. We also have a warrant related to elder financial abuse, she said, specifically the unauthorized transfer of funds from the accounts of Arthur Mercer, your father. My father looked up, startled by the sound of his name. What's happening? He asked. My mother froze. Sienna lowered her champagne glass slowly, her expression empty. Julian turned toward me, fury blazing in his eyes. You did this, he hissed. I stood, smoothing my dress. No, Julian, I said quietly. You did this. I only made sure the truth came out. I addressed the table. My brother has stolen $340,000 from our father over the past 2 years. He took out loans against our father's home without informed consent. He exploited our father's trust and declining health to fund his lifestyle while his company collapsed. I turned to Grant and Lydia. This merger would have made you complicit. Preston did you a favor. I looked at my mother. You put him in charge of Dad's finances because you believed he was the successful one. You believed I was nothing. Finally, I looked back at Julian. I own a company valued at $12 million. I employ 47 people. I recently signed a city contract worth $4,200,000. I have been featured in Design Monthly. I won a National Design Award. And I never told you any of it because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I am worth. The room was completely silent. But you didn't, I continued. You humiliated me. You dismissed me. And worst of all, you stole from the man who worked 40 years to give us a good life. Julian's face collapsed. Maya, please, he said. You have to help me. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Agent Marcus Hayes stepped forward. Sir, we need you to come with us now. As they escorted Julian out, he looked back at me one last time. The confidence was gone. All that remained was fear. I felt no triumph. No satisfaction. Only exhaustion and relief. After 34 years, the truth was finally visible. Sienna stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair, already dialing her phone. I need a lawyer, she said as she hurried out. And a divorce attorney. Caleb sat frozen, staring at me. You really own a $12 million company? He asked weakly. Goodbye, Caleb. I went to my father and took his hand. He looked at me through tears. Maya, I'm sorry. I trusted him. I know, Dad, I said softly. It's not your fault. I've got you now. He squeezed my hand. You were always the good one. Around us, chaos unfolded. My mother cried. Grant and Lydia made urgent calls. Preston finished his wine quietly, the way someone does who has witnessed the fall of many empires. Outside, Julian was guided into an unmarked car. No handcuffs yet. But his career, his reputation, his marriage, his freedom, all of it was finished. The pathetic sister was never the problem. 1 month later, I stood on a construction site in the early morning light, watching my crew install the final water feature for the Bayside Waterfront Revitalization Project. The air smelled of fresh earth and possibility. My boots were muddy. My hands were dirty. I had never felt more like myself. Julian's arrest had made local news, though I declined every interview request. The federal charges for securities fraud moved forward alongside state charges for elder financial abuse. His assets were frozen. His former company collapsed completely. The merger was dead. Sienna filed for divorce 48 hours after the dinner. I heard she was already dating one of her divorce attorneys. Some people always seem to land on their feet. Caleb called me twice, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails about how he had always believed in me and how maybe we could get coffee sometime. I deleted both messages without replying. Some bridges are not worth rebuilding. They are worth watching burn from a safe distance, preferably with a good glass of wine. The money Julian stole from my father was being recovered through the courts, but I did not wait for that process to finish. I paid off the fraudulent lien on my parents' house immediately. I set up a trust for my father's care using my own funds. I hired a part-time caregiver to help my mother manage his daily needs. My father's cognitive decline was real, but he was doing better now that the constant stress and confusion over money were gone. He spent most days in his garden tending to his tomato plants, sometimes calling me just to talk about nothing in particular. Those calls became the best part of my week. My mother and I had a difficult conversation a few days after the dinner. She did not apologize. That is not her way. But she did say something that surprised me. "I never really understood what you did," she admitted. "It looked like you were just playing in the dirt." Julian explained things in ways I could follow. Numbers. Titles. Things that sounded impressive. She paused. "I should have asked you more questions." It was not forgiveness exactly, but it was a beginning. Preston Whitman and I started having lunch together once a week. He became something of a mentor, offering advice and introducing me to contacts who could help Mercer Design Group grow even further. He said watching Julian's downfall had been the most entertainment he had experienced since retirement. He has a dark sense of humor. I respect that. My phone buzzed. A message from my foreman. The water feature was ready for its final test. I walked to the control panel and flipped the switch. Water surged upward in perfect arcs, catching the morning sunlight and forming small rainbows in the mist. The crew cheered. A few of them clapped me on the back. This was what I had built. Not just fountains and gardens, but a company of people who trusted me. Projects that would last for decades. Beauty shaped from raw materials, hard work, and stubborn determination. Julian had spent his career moving money between spreadsheets, creating nothing, building nothing, helping no one. In the end, he lost everything. I had spent my career with dirt under my fingernails, creating spaces that brought people joy, building something real. And in the end, I had everything that mattered. My phone rang. A new client wanted to discuss a $3 million commercial project. I looked down at my muddy boots, my calloused hands, my crew celebrating another successful installation. Some people spend so much time looking down on others that they never notice they are standing on quicksand. I answered the phone with a smile. "This is Maya Mercer. How can I help you?" Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and do not miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next one.